Hello everyone. Hope you're having an amazing Monday and welcome to Reality Bang. I'm RJ Yohann, your host for the session, and thank you for that said. If you guys want to contribute to topics, have to say, or just want to tell us what an amazing job you're doing, us at 6364252164. Let's jump right in today's topic. The topic for today is identity. Who am I? So we are doing up the last show. So we are continuing that, and we have a special guest for the show, Dr.Shobitha, who is the principal of Global School of Counselling, Bangalore. I'm on the show. This edition of the Reality Bank, I'm going to ask Dr. Shobitha a few questions that were sent in by viewers of the show. So our very first, where can our youth find identity?
See, identity, like last week's show, comes from various sources, right?
Yeah.
There's self and there's a psychosocial identity component, which comes from the environment stimulation as well. So our youth can find out, if they're basically looking out for identity, they can look at various sources, and that's a personal choice that they are making. However, what we do need to keep in mind is what is the choice that we are making to form our identity. That's a very important aspect. So, for example, for adolescents, one of the core components of where their identity comes from is family and friends. And more than family, friends are an important source for them at that point, right? For the identity to develop in that sense, and the ideology that I have to fit into a particular group and all of that. So it is very important. That is one area where they will get their identity from. So it's important to know who they are joining with, who they are aligning with. So if you're looking at it from the family context, it is important that parents spend quality time with the adolescents at that point of time. Not just cocooning them and trying to protect them from whatever dangers they foresee. Definitely, yes, there are dangers outside. However, what parents need to look at is conversation, not cocooning. It's all right for them to explore a few things and come back and discuss with us. Be open about talking about difficulties that they are facing, or talking about whatever issues that the adolescents are coming up with. Right? In adolescence, we call it as a phase of identity where it is still changing. It's not stable. It's still changing. This is a place where this is a time where adolescents are exploring a lot of options. They're trying to see what works for them and what doesn't work for them. So in that context, it's very, very important for parents to be a source of guide and support to nurture the development of the identity. So it's not that we are dictating how the identity grows, but we have to nurture how the identity is growing and where it's coming from, right?
Yeah.
Most importantly, one of the things that we have to keep in mind as to where youth can find identity, one important concept is self-evaluation. This is something that we spoke about last week as well. We have to constantly evaluate and re-evaluate ourselves as we progress in the different stages of our life, because we change every now and then. Every experience we go through, every relationship we get into, it changes who we are. It enriches who we are. It adds value to who we are, right? So it is important that we re-evaluate and evaluate ourselves through the whole process. The other source is good reading habits, or even if you're watching something online, what is it that we are watching? What value component is it adding to who I am as an individual? So that is very important. From others, from people around us. It can be friends, it can be relatives, it can be teachers under whom we are working with, it can be friends who we are with, it can be who we are working with, it can be from anywhere. So who are we allowing to be a source of influence for who I am? Where is my identity coming from? That's another source we have to keep in mind. The most important source, however, has to be our identity in Christ. No matter matter what, my identity has to be in Christ. Now, how do we help our adolescents and young adults to know how to identify themselves in Christ? Now, that's something that we have to learn as elders and people around the adolescents and young adults. As we are nurturing them, we have to help them understand and know the difference of what is right, what is wrong, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, and why. The reasoning out is very, very important. Because one of the things that, say for example, when we tell a child, don't touch it, you're going to burn yourself, they will go put their finger right on the candle, or wherever we are telling them not to touch, they will go and touch that, right? We will tell adolescents, don't go out alone with friends, especially later in the evening. They will do that. Don't talk to certain particular people, because we have, as elders, we would have foreseen something. And out of our experience, we would tell, don't do it. And they will exactly do what we tell them not to do. So one of the things how all of us learn, for that matter, even as adults, we also end up doing things like that, right? We would have decided that I want to clean this space, but when someone comes and tells me to clean that space, I don't want to touch that. I don't want to do it, right? That rebelliousness instinctively comes from within all of us. So it is very important to know the difference and to know why we have to do what we have to do. Reasoning out is very, very important for adolescents to learn why they have to do and what they have to do. So in the process of learning that, what they also learn is, so if I do this, what will be the consequence? If I don't do this, what will be the consequence? And the choice I am making once I know the consequence, that defines who I am as an individual. That becomes a part of my identity, because I'm making a conscious choice even after knowing the consequence if I'm doing something, right? That becomes a part of my identity. So that is how identity develops in the process. However, we have to nurture this identity and help people understand how to find their identity in Christ. That changing the trajectory of the whole growth scenario is very, very important.
Yeah, nowadays it's not advisable to just tell children not to do this, because they are going to do it anyway. Because especially in this generation, they're very curious to know like what the consequence is going to be. So it's more important to as you said, to tell them what the consequences will be if they do such things. So that brings us to my second question. Now, does trauma play a role in having an identity crisis?
To a certain degree, yes. When we are now talking about trauma, we also have to know there are different kinds of trauma, right? There is some trauma which is very sudden. There is some people have experienced over a period of time. So the time frame of how long they have experienced the trauma for makes a difference. At what age did the trauma start? Right? Say, for example, if a child or an adolescent has experienced verbal abuse or sexual abuse or physical abuse from a very early age on, then definitely it is going to have an impact on who they are and their identity. A very, very important component. However, I could have gone through, let's say, a financial crisis at a later stage in life. I wanted to start a business and then I have lost all the money investing in it. Now that trauma is different, right? Now, what happens in these two differences of trauma is, one trauma helps me to learn. It teaches me what not to do to become better, right? But the other trauma, the long-term trauma, which I'm unable to explain, which I'm unable to talk about, because I don't know who to confide in. Most often, abuse happens from those who are close to us, those who are part of my own family. So after that, I don't know whom to trust. So when I'm going through that kind of a situation, there is something called as rigidity, right? You become so stubborn, so strong because of the pain. Because of the pain you've endured, you just close yourself up. You're not able to open up to anybody else. So that requires a different kind of work to understand how to turn the trajectory back into something that will be helpful for the person. Whereas something that happens suddenly, or a loss of a family member, an accident happens, and you're not ready for the loss of the person whom you have missed at that point of time. That's a different way of dealing with it. To a certain degree, there have been studies that have shown that yes, trauma does have an impact on identity. Now, most of these studies have been qualitative, which have shown where people have verbalized that this is what shaped, this is how it made me feel. When I went through the situation, this is how it made me feel. So there are some studies which have said that yes, trauma has an impact on identity development. However, there are also other studies which are showing that trauma need not necessarily have a negative impact on someone. It can also have a positive impact on someone. So, what we have to understand here is my perception of the trauma is what makes the difference. So, some situation may be traumatic for me, it may not be traumatic for you. So, a smaller thing for me can be a bigger thing for someone else. So, it's important to understand the perception from where I'm looking at the trauma. How am I allowing the trauma to impact me? Now, this sense of maturity of knowing the difference will happen very later on in life. Say, for example, adults, once you become into that adult stage, early adulthood or late adulthood, there is a certain level of maturity you get just by going through the different experiences. Whereas as an adolescent, nowadays it's different. Children are emotionally very, very strong at this point of time. They do understand, but it also depends upon where they are getting their source of information from. They need to get it from the right source. Then the trajectory can be good. They can learn. Trauma can be there, but they can learn from that. They can grow from that. They can enrich themselves from that. So when we are looking at trauma, we have to understand the different components of trauma, the time frame of trauma, and our own perception of how we are viewing the trauma as. All of this together factors in how much of impact it will have on my identity or not.
Yeah. Now, coming over to the third question. Now, does a person's achievements determine their identity?
I'm sorry, does
Does
person's achievement
a person's achievements determine their identity?
Again, it's a very, very personal thing, but we can look at achievers in three different categories, right? Yeah. There are overachievers, there are underachievers, and there are people who constantly keep losing all the time. Yeah. There's no sense of achievement at all. So we have to understand what category we are looking at. By itself, achievement does not have to determine my identity. However, what we have been taught is otherwise. If I take good marks, then my identity completely changes because of the level of acceptance of the people around me. So when I get first rank, all the teachers praise me. The number of friends I have increase around me. And when I achieve something, when I get into a good job, when I earn a lot of money, the feedback I'm getting from the surroundings around me and from the people around me can determine how I am viewing myself as. And there's a danger in that. If I'm going to allow my achievement to determine who I am as a person, as an individual, I will lose the sense of happiness in the longer run. Achievement will not always be there. There will be some times where we will achieve. There will be some times where we may not be able to achieve as per the requirement. So what happens when I'm not able to achieve? I am not able to meet the expectations I have put on myself. And that crushes me. I'm not able to accept the loss. One of the most difficult things that adolescents and young people face right now is they can't face pain, they can't face rejection. We say no, it's the trauma. The entire roof comes down, they throw a tantrum, they start fighting. They are not able to take no for an answer. That's what
Yeah.
achievement can do to us. So our concentration should not be in terms of how much we are achieving, but rather in the quality of the achievement. Now, in whatever achievement I am getting, am I growing as an individual? How is my sense of self concept? How is my sense of self esteem? My sense of self worth? I have to know the difference in all of these things. Otherwise, I'm going to not be at peace with how much ever I can. I can get the entire world. But if I'm not happy with myself, that sense of achievement is not going to give me the peace I'm looking for. Is not going to give me the happiness I am at the end of the day struggling all the while for. So achievement should not determine our identity. However, that is what is being taught to us throughout in any situation. We are being constantly given feedback. A simple example. If I say, for example, I post this video online, right? And I expect that everybody should put like. Now, if I don't get the like, what will happen to me?
Yeah,
If I'm not confident
sad.
about myself, it drags me, it pulls me down.
Yeah.
I'm not happy. I put so much of effort in doing this. I'm talking, I'm making sense, but nobody likes it. So sense of achievement should not determine who I am. Sense of achievement is one component of my life. As I am growing, I may achieve, I may not achieve certain things. And it is all right. If I'm achieving something, I'm happy, I'm growing as a person. If I'm not achieving, I need to be able to be flexible enough to see what I need to improvise from. How can I make myself better? That should be the level of maturity we need to have, and that's good identity.
That was a very good piece of advice for the third question. Now, coming over to my fourth question. Now, what does a stable identity look like?
Studies show a lot of things about stable identity. There have been so many theories of how a person's identity should look like, right? Ideally, identity is looked at as something that is very, very stable, something that does not change. But what we have to understand is identity is not a static construct. It's not something that is very constant. It keeps changing. It keeps evolving. So, how a stable identity will look like, a mature identity would be flexible enough to adapt to different situations. That's a stable identity. The second thing about stable identity is whatever changes around me in my life, how I view myself will be a constant. I can throw a anger episode, I can throw a temper tantrum episode in front of so many people because of the momentary situation that happens. Now, I should not go back and keep that as my identity in my mind. That's not stable identity. Stable identity will rather, on the other hand, tell me that it is okay, it was just a momentary emotional outburst that you had. Go back, apologize for what you did to whoever is concerned, repair the damage, and get back on the relationship, get back on track, do what the right thing is. That is a stable identity where I know that I'm not that person. It's just a situational change that has made me or did or make me do what I did. So adaptability is one thing. Flexibility is very important for a stable identity. We should be flexible enough to mature and evolve and enrich ourselves in the growth process. Now, there are different trajectories our identity can take depending upon the stage of life in which we are. So, like I said, in adolescence, the trajectory is going to be very shifting. It's not going to be static, it's going to be moving on, right? However, the same identity that is shifting in adolescence will be a little more progressive when we are coming to young adult, right? So, we should understand the terminologies. When I say shifting, I'm exploring. I'm exploring what my identity is. As an adult, I'm progressing, which means to a certain extent, my identity is fixed. However, I'm trying to make it better. I'm progressing. Now, as I'm progressing in creating this identity and fixing it, that this is my identity, there can be situations around me, there can be people around me, which is stopping the progress because of various reasons. It can be because, say, for example, I'm not able to find a good job. I'm already 25, 26, but I have not been married. I'm not getting a good proposal. Everything that's coming is not working out. Now, what will happen when this kind of situations come at that point of time? The progress of the identity development gets hindered. It stops. Because I am reviewing, I am re-evaluating. The feedback that nobody is accepting me as a bride or a groom is an indicator that I'm not good enough. So I am trying to change something else about myself. That's a progressive identity. Now, if you are looking at a stable identity, then I should be rather looking at what are the reasons why this proposal has not worked out. Why have I not been able to stick on a stable job? What is it about me as an individual that is not working out well? Rework on myself, not on my identity, but on my skill set.
Yeah.
Skill set is important. My identity should be the same, but I can improve on my skill set. I can improve on what needs to be done to better myself as an individual. Those are two different things. So a stable identity will remain stable. This is who I am. I'm calm, I'm composed. I know how to handle myself in difficult situations, and I can rework on myself. I have good emotional regulation. I know when I am disturbed. I am aware that these are the things that triggers me. That's my identity. What is my skill set? Now, how do I use this identity to improve my skill set? Which will get me a better job, which will help me progress in life as an individual, which will help me achieve the dreams that I want to achieve in my life. So that is a stable identity. So in short, if you're looking at a stable identity, it should be something where I am seeing myself the same person in the past, present, and future. However, I'm also flexible and adaptable to change and to enrich myself as an individual. I'm willing to work on myself. That's a stable identity.
Yeah. Now that was very detailed and a very good explanation. Now coming over to the fifth question. Now, who are the role models that young children or young adults should look up to when they are trying to take on a new identity, which they would want?
See, most often our children look at superhero capes and somebody who's flying and who's able to do everything. So there's no defining, who should be my role model, because that's a very personal thing. I decide who I want to take as my role model. However, what we can keep in mind, though, on the other hand, are characteristics of people whom I can look up to as role model. So one of the first characteristics of a person who can be a role model is, am I having similar traits with that person? If I'm not having similar traits with the person, I cannot think of becoming like the person, because that's not me.
Yeah.
I'm changing myself completely, and that's not going to help me. That's just going to make me feel bad about myself and insufficient about myself. That's not right. So if I'm looking up to someone as a model, there has to be some similar traits, characteristic traits in that particular person. The other thing is, who the success determines. See, most often who we choose as a role model, someone who's willing to take a risk, and someone who has taken a significant risk and they have succeeded in it. Like, say, for example, Elon Musk. Person has taken quite an amount of tremendous risk in terms of what he has done, and he has succeeded, and he has reached a place in life where he is able to determine global level changes of what is acceptable, what is not acceptable at the technology level. right? In different forms of technological advances. So why do people look up to him? Because he has put in the determination to work, hard work. He has taken the calculated amount of risk, and he has succeeded in whatever risks he has taken as well. Now, these are traits we have to keep in mind when we are looking up to a person or anybody else as a role model. The other thing is, role models also have to be people who are willing to show their vulnerability, that I'm not all the perfect person. I also have my set of weaknesses, but who are also willing to share how they have overcome these vulnerabilities. What have I done as an individual to overcome these obstacles? Is why are we looking at a role model? Because I want an example to see what will help me grow, what will help me achieve the dream that I'm looking at. So, looking at a person is an inspiration. Looking at someone who has done the same thing is an inspiration for me. So, how I do that, it's not that people who have grown up to a certain level of success have just reached overnight. They have had their downfalls. We have read about so many inventions where it has taken time. People like 1,000 times they have failed, and the 1,001st time they have achieved something. So many trials they have attempted, they have failed, and in the last attempt something clicked and worked out. So we know that reaching a point is not an easy thing. It takes a certain level of effort, because they are also human beings. They have had their own difficulties, and they have overcome those difficulties. So if you're looking at someone as a role model, we have to know their vulnerabilities and how they have overcome those vulnerabilities. Now, the other thing about someone who can help in being a role model is someone who's very creative, who can think out of the box, who will help us get new perspective to the same problem that we have. Most of the problems that people have are almost the same. But why is it that some people are able to achieve and some are not? Because the ones who are achieving think out of the box, think of new ways of overcoming that problem. They look at the problem as in a very different perspective altogether, right? So these are certain traits that we can keep in mind when we are looking out for a supermodel. However, to choose who my role model is going to be is a personal thing. Ideally, we have a lot of role models in the Bible, a lot of role models. And each one is very, very different, very unique, very significant in why their stories have been given in the Bible in the first place. Starting from the Old Testament, see, one of the characters that really touched me was Enoch. There's only like 1 or 2 verses about Enoch. But that's very significant, where for me it made me think in that way, where Enoch was in almost 900 years by then. He had a family of his own. He had children of his own. And yet people saw him walking with God. No, very clearly the verse says he was walking with God and then he was not there after that. Right? So something that we all are struggling at this point of time is balancing life. Balancing my work, balancing my home, balancing my studies, balancing my family life is a very real struggle that we all have. So how was Enoch able to do it? That to a point where God called him friend. God walked with him, God talked with him. And he had his own responsibilities. It's not that he was just whiling away his time only being with God. No. He did what he had to do, and yet he also managed his time with God. And that for me is a role model. Now, how do I balance my life like that? How do I give that importance to God in my life and yet have all my other things in place? Right? So, like that, there are so many characters in the Bible, big ones, small ones, which have played significant role. And there is a reason why their lives have been described in the Bible. So if we actually spend time in reading the Bible, in getting to know the Word of God, He will show us who He wants us to imitate and how He wants us to walk. At the end of the day, in the beginning, if we read Genesis, it's very clear. Our purpose was in Him. We were all created in Him and through Him.
Yeah.
And we were created for Him, for the glory of His name. We were all created for Christ. And Christ came, He lived among us, and He showed us that you can be human and yet you can have certain traits which will get you closer to me, which will show you how you can identify yourself in me. He has lived and He has shown. So I don't think there's no better role model than what Christ has done, to have lived and showed what we have to do. And He has given us significant other examples as well. Again, that's a personal choice. So this is the best way to go about looking for a role model. But if you're still not happy, there are traits that we can keep in mind. If we have to choose someone else as a role model, make sure these are traits that you're looking for in that person. So you're not distracted or diverted. Because if you choose a role model and you're not able to live up to them, again, it can be a very dissatisfying experience. So if we are looking at peace and happiness and growth, then this is the trajectory we need to probably be looking at.
That was a very well informed answer to all the questions. Thank you so much, ma'am. And I would like to close on one special verse. It is no longer I that liveth, but Christ that liveth in. So that officially brings us to the end of today's show. Thank you everyone for joining the show. Thank you, Dr. Shobitha, for joining the show and giving your valuable inputs to these various questions. Remember, guys, we air on Mondays at 4:30 p.m. That said, if you guys want to contribute to our topics, have anything, or just want to tell us what an amazing job you're doing, you can reach out to us at 6364252164. And a huge thank you to our listeners for tuning in to this edition of The Reality Bind, your weekly dose of youth power, brought to you by FEBA Online. This is RJ Yohann. Hope you have an amazing Monday, and I'll see you next week. God bless you.